You know, I always do that because of the freeze frame.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Monday Night Mythbusters.
Hi guys.
I'm Dr. George. I'm just going to arrange this the framing here a little bit. And I'm with Leslie Harrington, Transformational Coach. We are coming to you live from Vita Integrative Medicine offices. And tonight we're going to be speaking with Leslie about her new book, which is How to Divorce Your Diagnosis. So I love this title. I think it's awesome. Hi there, Cheyenne. Hi, Marianne.
Hi, Marianne.
So this is something that's really near and dear to home because pretty much every patient that comes across my desk has got a story that they're connected with, the story of their illness. And it's really important for me to learn that story. It tells me a lot. So it's not that it's a bad thing, but sometimes people can get too connected to it, that they're living what they think they should be living. They're really kind of not in tune with who they are, but rather the title that they've been given. And you can get that through other things. For example, my twins. I could go through life calling them twins, and then they wouldn't have their separate identity, but I choose to call them by their individual names rather than, oh, my twin's this, oh, my twin's that, because you live what your name is, which I think is why it's really important that everybody has a name that resonates with them, but similarly, their diagnosis can really resonate.
Yeah, and I think we're given titles in all aspects of life and from different people and the roles that we play. And there's an expectation that comes with that role, and when we start to internalize that expectation, whether it's on ourselves or something someone else has placed on us, it becomes very powerful.
Yes.
And this is really about kind of stepping out from under that umbrella, you know, that and really kind of owning your own identity and realizing that you're not your diagnosis, you're not your title, you're not this term that someone has put you in this category with other people.
Because you're much more complex than that, and much more interesting than that. Hey there, Teresa, Ellen, glad that you could join us.
Hey, girls.
So first I'd like to kind of just have everybody shout out anybody that's been given a diagnosis that's kind of stunned them or changed their life in some way. Can you put a hands up or give me a wave or a thumbs up or anything like that? I would say probably most of our viewing audience would have something that resonates with them that way.
Yeah, and it can be any diagnosis. So when we say divorce, it could be something super extreme. It could be chronic. It could be something that you dealt with at one time in your life that you may have not necessarily disconnected from, that you still really resonate with. And it's important to note that when we talk about divorcing it and separating yourself from it, it doesn't mean ignoring it. It doesn't mean not acknowledging and honoring that it's part of your journey and what you're going to experience. And it doesn't mean by any means pretending it doesn't exist, right? There's different steps that you need to go through when you're given this diagnosis. And the first thing I think a lot of us feel when someone validates that there's something wrong, right? Because often you know there's something wrong. And I talk a lot about my own personal story in that, where it took about 6 months before anyone could really give me that title, you know, that identity. And I was relieved when I got it. It made me feel validated that I wasn't crazy. There was something wrong, and I knew there was something wrong, but no one could really tell me there was something wrong. It was like, you know, oh no, you're fine. Oh, your blood's fine, and this is fine, and all these things came out normal. And I was over here going, but I'm not fine, right? And so when I got that title, it made me feel like empowered. I'm like, wow, I was right, you know? And so there's different phases that you experience when you get that validation. But the thing is you have to figure out how much to kind of hold on to it and how much you want to really take that and you know, learn about it, educate, and then of course, like you see that they come in here sometimes so steadfast, holding on to what they think they have and the things that used to work that don't work anymore.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And they may truly have that diagnosis. We're not saying that they don't have that diagnosis, but they're trying to kind of be only that diagnosis and follow the letter of the law of what that's supposed to include, what you're supposed to eat and drink and sleep and feel. And life is just much more complex than that.
Yeah, I think I became very calculated. Every single decision and thing that I made was around my diagnosis. I even called it. My condition was called POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And 9 years ago, no one knew what that was, right? But everything I said when I discussed it was my POTS, my condition, my heart, my blood flow, my brain, my dizziness, my brain fog. It was mine, you know, and I owned it. You know, it was like I made it so much about who I was that it started to become who I was. And that's what it's really about, is learning to know that diagnosis doesn't equal your destiny. It's just something that is part of your life. And eventually, you know, we talked about how to turn that mess into your message. That's something that you don't recognize when you're in it. But as you progress through and you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you start to imagine what your life can be and will be like when you start to heal, that's when you can really do a lot of really powerful things and help other people, you know, go through these experiences.
Right. And I think a quote that you've got in the book from Norman Cousins was awesome. And it's, never deny a diagnosis, but do deny the negative verdict that may go with it. So I think that's really important. The diagnosis is one thing, but if the doctor tells you you've got 3 months to live, deny that. You know, do your own thing. If they tell you that you're going to be crippled and never walk again, deny that. So you work kind of your own path. Now that might end up to be true, but you don't kind of make it a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not the destiny, and that's where, you know, I talk a little bit about the nocebo.
Yes.
And the expectation that we put on what the outcome's going to be, right? And as humans, we naturally crave certainty, and life's uncertain, right? And so when we develop this endpoint and this kind of predicted pattern of what's going to happen, we're giving ourselves the satisfaction of what we believe is certain, and we're living up to that.
Right.
And that's where you need to consider breaking that pattern, deny it. There's actually in a lot of research in cancer patients that those patients that are in denial and they're not just submitting to everything that they've been told have better outcomes. They have more successful outcomes.
Right.
So being able to you know, recognize that this is not your destiny. It can, you know, it may very well take you in a direction that statistically, you know, that disease does. But you have choices of how you handle every step of the way.
And that's called a nocebo effect, different from the placebo effect, where you can have benefit because your brain is telling you, oh, this is an active medication and it's going to make me better. That's placebo. But nocebo is, okay, well, this medication, it says I'm supposed to be nauseous. Oh, I think I'm starting to feel nauseous. Yes. And so you start to make real the possibilities that are there rather than not knowing about it. If you hadn't known that medicine was going to make you nauseous, you probably never would have noticed it, right? So sometimes all of these kind of negatives can be very self-fulfilling. What the doctor tells you is expected to be happening, what the side effects of your medicine, how you're supposed to feel, what the rest of your life is going to be like, can be just like they tell you if you really buy into that. So.
Yeah, and that's actually a really important point. I was told I would be on medication, my heart medication, for the rest of my life. And I believe that, you know, and people would ask me, I'm like, the rest of my life, you know. And coming from the pharmaceutical world, they didn't test anything for the rest of your life, right? And the nature of chronic illness in today's world, a lot of the drugs are being developed with the anticipation and expectation that they're maintenance. They're going to be the rest of your life. My entire body changed. My health changed when I turned around my nutrition and the way that I cared for myself. My body was a different state than it was when I first started medication. So I personally was able to transition off medication. It's not going to always be the case, but the point is to understand that it doesn't have to be, that you will be forever, you know, destined and kind of handcuffed to this outcome that one person maybe told you because that's their opinion.
Right. Right, absolutely. And so Blair makes the good point that the internet can be a very dangerous place to search for answers without understanding and education. And unfortunately, there's a wide variety of information out there, so nowadays people aren't generally going to doctors for that information because it's all out there, but they're going to specific doctors to find out, does that information apply to me, right? So you can kind of go down that rabbit hole and think, oh my God, I've got cancer and I'm going to die next week, and that's what this rash means, right? But then you go to the doctor and no, that's not what that means. It's, a bug bit you or something. So Dr. Google, Dr. Yahoo can be very dangerous, so it's really important to kind of look at that information in context and talk to your healthcare provider about those kinds of things. But even apart from that, don't believe it all, right? Just, you don't have to deny the diagnosis, but deny the verdict is again what I come back to.
Yeah, and the internet's the blessing and the curse. It's amazing that we have so much information at our fingertips. You have to consider the source. You have to consider the financial reason that someone,
Post something,
did some sort of research on something. There's a lot of things to consider. So if you're not accustomed to really understanding different valid sites and the natural side of things, the conventional side of things, there's motive.
Right.
The government run organizations, those are just things that you want to just really make sure that you understand all sides of medicine. There's going to be a lot of purist thinking ways that it's this way.
Thinking, yeah.
In understanding that there's a time and a place for both sides, and then of course nutrition, and that for me, my nutrition was such a big needle mover in changing some of the course of how my health was. And when I finally started to step out of that divorce, when I got separated, a lot of that had to do with some of my own techniques that I had implemented.
So tell us a little about how you think somebody can tell if they are so enmeshed with their diagnosis. Is there any kind of way that they can kind of sit back and look at what they're doing to tell about that?
Yeah, I definitely think, like I said, about calling it yours. So watch your language, how you speak to yourself, how you speak to other people, how you describe things. Finding yourself doing activities that might be private, where you maybe either feel embarrassed or you isolate yourself. Finding that someone like your friends. I mean, I had a very big change in my friend base, because a lot of people, especially with chronic illness and some of these things where you look good on the outside but you're very sick on the inside, people don't get it, right? So if you find that you're hiding from people, or you're not feeling like you can be candid or be able to be yourself, right? Those are all kind of things that are starting to maybe trigger that you're starting to isolate, and you're starting to kind of become a little bit wrapped into that being who you are, because you don't even want to share who you are anymore because you're so much contained.
On the other hand, what if that's all you ever talk about is your diagnosis, and you don't ever ask other people about how they are, or you don't get kind of involved in the outside world because you're just so consumed with your disease?
That, and not having any outlook, like your destiny. You're like, this is now me, right? And then it becomes all about you. It becomes all about your own healing, how you feel, how you're just completely doing anything and everything to manage how you feel. And you start to forget about all the things around you, and which is ironic, because one of the very best things you can do to snap yourself away from that is to take some of that energy that you're putting there and extend it outward, and start to be more graceful with the people in your life, and focus on other people, and how do you feel, what's going on with them, and
right. Yeah. I'd say that's kind of a number one way to really help people kind of just see that there's other people that are in pain also, other people that are sick, that don't feel well, and get out there and try to help them.
Yes.
Maybe it's somebody with your same diagnosis, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's a family member. So sometimes an illness of a family member can actually be a blessing, because that then tends to transport you out of your body, back into the world with everybody else, so that you can see, I'm not the only one here that's in pain. I'm not the only one that's got something going on, and then you can heal together
Absolutely. And I think too, like to your point with, in my case, my mom was sick, and my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And my mom didn't have a lot of options and choices, and it made me stop and go, gosh, like I'm so stuck in this thing that's my story, and it's become all of who I am. And when I started to focus on my mom and helping her and her health and her lack of control, when I felt like I had control over my outcome, it shifted. It was a major shift for me, and I was so tired of my story that was the trigger point for me, that I was like, this isn't my story anymore. And that was when I kind of got out from under that umbrella, and I started to walk side by side with the diagnosis, instead of having it be as one and identifying everything about my life.
Right. And Marianne says it helps you to feel normal knowing others are experiencing the same, and that's truer words were not spoken. It's very important in all realms of illness, no matter kind of what your diagnosis, or even if it's just a symptom that doesn't yet have a diagnosis. Just knowing that other people have been through this and that you'll get through this too is really reassuring. So, and
it's great to share some of the things, like in the book I talk about 11 critical steps that were really super important and powerful for me. Everybody has techniques and tactics and tools that they either learned or created for themselves that helped them to kind of transition. And I also have some testimonials of people who live with chronic illness. I have a girl with type 1 diabetes who you would never know. She's an Ironman. She's doing her first Ironman at 50 years old. And she's been an athlete her entire life, and she has an insulin pump. We do Pilates together, and you see her in there, and you would never know that she's 100% insulin dependent, and she has major shifts all day long in her blood sugar. And this is a well-controlled someone who's had it for 30 years.
Yeah.
And so it's being able to have that.
She didn't stay at home and not exercise because it might mess with her insulin requirements. She said, okay, I'm going to get out there and do it.
Exactly. Right. From the very beginning, she learned about the condition, and she took it into her own hands, and she owned it and empowered herself to not only help herself, but she does stuff for the JDRF, and she's out there talking about it, and she's out there helping other people with it. And, there's so many people that I see. Even I have friends with adult ADHD and stuff that it doesn't stop them, but they're medicated, and there's things that have a stigma but you would never know because they're able to really continue through life.
Now I want to shift gears a little bit and kind of ask you, tell me a little bit about how you see this with kids and how parents treat children with diagnoses like ADHD or autism or cancer or any kind of autoimmune or any kind of chronic disease like the insulin-dependent diabetics. It's mostly a diagnosis found in childhood, or used to be. And so what would you encourage parents of children with these types of illnesses to do to help the child not become the diagnosis, nor the parent, because the parent can really start to identify as I'm a mother of a person.
Schools and explaining to the teachers, and it becomes
it becomes huge.
We are in a place where chronic diseases are being diagnosed much younger, and things that we never saw in children, like type 2 diabetes. Children are becoming insulin dependent in their teens. It's unheard of, the stuff that's happening.
They were before with
with type 1. So type 2 meaning, and which used to be very unusual. I mean, type 2 was known as a senior disease, so having these things, and especially now with the prevalence of autism and ADHD, these things are powerful, and these titles are powerful. And the kids will grow up with that being kind of like their perceived limitation. And they develop limiting beliefs, and they're going to create stories around what this meant for them to protect themselves from the stigma, from whatever they believe why they're different. And these are things that they'll carry on, and those stories will serve something for them most of their life, but it catches up, and that's where you need to be able to help make sure that story that they're telling themselves is going to be something that's going to serve them in a healthy way down the road. So there's nothing wrong with creating stories to protect ourselves, but make sure you're telling yourself a good one, because down the road, you know, your health will be dramatically impacted by that. So as far as parents go, I would think, you know, making sure that they're not emphasizing the title, emphasizing the diagnosis,
Right.
identifying the child that way in all aspects.
This is
whether
my
it's
child with
within
Crohn's.
the family.
This is my child's with autism. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yep. No, that can be big.
You
And
see that too a lot, even with
a lot, and it can be hard because as a parent you want the best for your child. You want to make sure that the world around understands that they're not like maybe some other children, but that can have big problems too.
Yes.
As Blair mentions here, they can become ostracized by
Yes.
this diagnosis, and because they've got to have special there's a special table because they've got an allergy, or a special this or a special that, and then kids can get really resentful, and so can adults that are around them. So it's a very fine line that's difficult
Yeah.
to tread. There's no question. You've got to have those issues taken care of if they're allergic or they need some kind of special treatment. But you don't want to make people kind of feel sorry for them. You don't want to make, you know, you still want them to know that they've got challenges they have to live up to, and that they can have goals and do things just like anybody else.
Yeah, and I think it's important too to note that it can unravel into other things. So if the child is going through all these diagnoses and these doctors and these things, they'll get frustrated, and they'll start to, you know, do things to either act out, or they might do things that are not so healthy, and you know, it can become something that turns really disappointing for the child early in their life. So it's a fine line, but definitely a big topic.
Big piece. So guys out there, any questions, any experiences you want to share that where you kind of felt like you became enmeshed in your diagnosis, or recognized that you were, and how did you deal with it?
Hi, Claude.
Okay.
Yeah, how did you deal with it? And then also, anybody out there who has something that they feel that they really can completely have overcome, and or are kind of dancing with it, you know, like they're able to kind of just I like to say, like, you have to honor it. You have to respect that this is part. It's like going through a relationship and pretending you got nothing from it. Like, you might be divorced, but that represented a very important time that you walk away with a lot of lessons and a lot of experiences.
Right.
So you still have to kind of take the respect of it and say, you know, what can I do with this to move forward? So yeah, if anybody has an experience to share where they're either in it and they're struggling, and you know, you want like some of the tips and some of the critical steps that I have 11 in the book. I mean, we can dabble with a couple, but there's a lot of really useful tools that are pretty life-changing, that can really shift you out of that diagnosis mindset into who am I? You know, who do I want to be? And I'm still this person with all these qualities. I'm not my diagnosis.
So what would one of the first steps be that you'd encourage people to do?
Well, like I mentioned about changing your story, shifting your mindset into away from so much about me, and why this happened to me, and turning it into why this happened for me, right?
Yeah, it's
Being
huge.
able to shift that into, now guess what? I can help someone walk through this path, and I can say, hey, this is what I did to overcome it. Being able to kind of take yourself out of that defining role. You know, that's a big one. The other thing for me that was really super powerful was gratitude.
Yes.
I kind of can
Can't forget
cross-reference
stuff like that.
gratitude and wins, because you have to celebrate every little amazing thing, right? An amazing thing when you're sick can simply be that you felt good for 3 minutes that day. Like, it can be something so
Small,
incredibly
right.
tiny, but when you start finding those little tiny moments and those tiny things that you're like, this is a celebration, really make a big deal out of it, and eventually your mind will start to kind of take you in that direction. You almost become intolerant of negative thinking. Like, now I'm like, I don't even, my mind, I autocorrect anytime my mind takes me in a poor me, or any, and okay, not to mention the fake it till you make it. Poor me is important too. It's okay to feel poor me.
Right.
It's a matter of
But then you gotta
feeling
shake
it
yourself
and
up
then
and
moving
go.
on. So it's don't ignore that this is a real thing, and it does stink. You know, when you get this diagnosis, it stinks. There's something about it that's going to stink. But then you can move on from it. You just can't really stay down there for so long. And you know, it's honoring that emotion that comes with it. So you might feel sadness, you might feel anger, you might feel distress. Experience it, live in it, sit in that uncomfortable, and then move on.
Yeah, and then move on. And one of the great ways of moving on is just sitting down and saying, okay, what am I grateful for this moment, right? Or what is something good that happened to me today or yesterday or last week? Yeah. You can always find something. Somebody called you, the sun shone, you had a meal you really like. You woke up, yeah. All right, you managed to get out of bed, even though it was really painful maybe. So there's all kinds of things that you can be grateful for that are just really simple things, like the smell of fresh cut grass, you know, just certain sounds that bring back memories. I mean, you can kind of think of all kinds of things. Even if you're laying in bed feeling lousy, there can be something that you can find to be grateful about.
And when you're looking and digging deep for that gratitude, you've got to be present for that to happen, right? Mm-hmm. So being able to hear the birds or smell the grass, you're putting yourself in a presence. So there's kind of like, you get a little bit of a meditative effect from that gratitude also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Robin says a big step in having the courage to question your doctor and break away from a recommended treatment that does not feel right or too cookie cutter. I love that. Yeah, that's so
intuition. Important. Listening to yourself is so important.
Yes, and like, again, it's that person's opinion, right? So if someone's telling you it's normal, don't worry, it's normal, it's common, it's this and that. If it doesn't feel right for you and you know something's going on, you don't stop. You never stop trying to figure out. And that's the one of the critical steps I put in there, is that never stop trying to understand and trying to get better, because you will find different ways and different tools to do that. But that was a great point, Robin. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's all part of that journey, right? So it's just what resonates with you, what feels right, what's your intuition saying. Honor that along with all the other things we've spoken about, how you're feeling. But then, okay, I feel lousy, but okay, I'm going to get up and I'm going to do this anyways. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to fake it till I make it. Right?
Yeah, and I do talk a lot about faking it till you make it. And I believe fake it till you make it is such a good trait to be able to pull that off. You have to be careful with that, because some of the people with the highest resilience ultimately wear a lot of that emotion inside their bodies. And when you're faking it till you make it all of the time, eventually it will catch up to you and it'll find ways to express itself in different parts of your body, different times in your life. Yeah. So it's really important to fake, I call it fake it till you make it, but honor your inner drama queen. So give yourself those moments, and if it's not the right time to break down when it comes on you or you feel that lump in your chest, make sure that you recognize that it's there and it needs to move. So if it's some time that you take by yourself later in that day and you just schedule that time to fall apart, give yourself that 90-second breakdown. You know, I mean, it really only takes about 90 seconds for you to peak out, rather than let it be a lifetime of blocked energy. Like, let it out, and then again, don't stay down there.
Right.
Go back to, making it. And maybe you're not faking it anymore, because now you've gotten rid of some of the emotion, and now it's starting to actually be real for you.
And in order to kind of get that piece out, like, we think about this area here, this is our throat, and so we often have feelings of blockage in your throat or your upper chest, and that's often you not speaking your truth. So if you just start to journal some of that, write that down, talk to somebody that's trusted, but kind of putting it out there, and then you can have that breakdown. You can cry, for 5, 10, 15 minutes. If that doesn't work, sometimes, as you were mentioning, looking at pictures that kind of can bring that back. Sentimental songs can do that to help you kind of just let it wash over you and let it pass, right? So get it out and then pick your stuff up and on you go.
Definitely. That was a very, very significant, especially some of you athletes out there, the runners, the guys, we have that exercise as you're venting, right? Like that's something that's super, super great for you mentally, emotionally. Just be careful that you're not expressing some of the emotion because you're running it off. And again, that will catch up with you. And if it's not physically, you know, it'll find you some other way in your mind, in your body, in your day. So just, I love that exercise is such a big stress relief for so many people. And there's, you know, all kinds of reasons why. It's just make sure that it doesn't replace crying and it doesn't replace experiencing emotional pain, whether it's anger or sadness or depression or whatnot.
Right, exactly. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you very much for joining us. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to type them down. We'll try to respond over the next few days. And as always, if you think this is something that can help somebody you love, or no, maybe you don't love, maybe you want to love, maybe they're being really mean and resentful because they've got a lot of this stuff going on and you think maybe that they would benefit from hearing this, please share it.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much for participating and for coming out.
Thank you. And next week, I can't remember what we're talking about, but we'll tell you about it soon. Just
and if you want more information on the book, I have divorceyourdiagnosis.com.
Yes, so Divorce Your Diagnosis. Let's do it that way. divorceyourdiagnosis.com. Or you can check, we'll put this on the Dr. Carolyn George MD website as well. And if you still can't find it, just call our office and we'll make sure you can get it. Okay?
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Have a good night.
We'll see you in a couple weeks, Blair. Okay?
How's it coming down?
We've got our 30th anniversary of our medical school, 30th anniversary of medical school graduation.
Awesome.
So we're getting old. Yes, which is good. I'm not complaining. I'd much rather be, this is gratitude, right? I'd much rather be old than 6 feet under, okay? So on that note, sit down every night and really do your gratitude, and it's going to help every aspect of your life. I can't accentuate that enough.
So big.
Yeah, it's huge. Anyways, thanks, guys. We'll talk
Bye,
later.
guys.